You think inheriting an old house is a dream come true. What if the house had its own mind and deadly rules? Tonight on Night Creepypasta Rules. A woman in San Jose learns her new home follows an impossible blueprint. Because this architect demands you become part of the design. They say Silicon Valley builds the future. Sleek glass towers scraping the relentless California blue. But my new house, inherited from a great aunt I barely knew existed, felt like it was actively unbuilding the past. One impossible door, an echoing footstep at a time, tucked away on a quiet, tree-lined street in an older part of San Jose. The house was a relic, a sprawling, slightly sagging Victorian Gothic, all dark wood, ornate trim. And too many shadowed gables, an architectural anomaly amidst the neat bungalows and aspiring tech money remodels. It was also crucially mine, rent-free, which, after losing my job and my fiancée in the same brutal month back in LA, made it less of an inheritance and more of a lifeboat, even if it felt like it might be listing. Stepping inside for the first time felt like entering a pocket of stillness, where the bright California sunshine feared to tread. Dust motes danced in the thin beams of light slanting through tall, grimy windows. The air was cool, thick with the scent of old wood, decaying paper, lavender furniture polish gone faint, and something else underneath, a faint, dry mineral tang, like disturbed plaster or old stone. The layout felt illogical. Hallways turned at odd angles. Small rooms branched off larger ones without apparent reason, and shadows pooled in corners with an almost physical presence. Still, it was four walls and a roof. A port in the storm of my imploded life. I just had to make it work. My ancestor, the original Eleanor Vance from Salem, whose history I'd vaguely tried to trace, faced accusations far worse than unemployment and a broken heart. Surely I could handle an old, creaky house. I hadn't even finished hauling my boxes inside when he appeared. My neighbor. He materialized on the sidewalk as I wrestled with a particularly heavy box, startling me. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he beamed, extending a hand. "Elias Vance, your great aunt Agnes and I were acquaintances. Sad business, her passing." He was maybe in his late 50s. Dressed a little too formally for a Saturday afternoon, with overly bright eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the house behind me. His friendliness felt slightly forced, overly effusive. "Quite a place she left you," he continued, his gaze sweeping over the house's facade with an unnerving familiarity, full of history and character. "Needs a bit of love, of course. Those upper floor joists can be tricky, I hear." How would he hear about the joists? "Thanks," I mumbled, hefting my box. "Just moving in." Of course. "Well, anything you need. History of the place, quirks of the plumbing. Just give a knock." He gestured to the equally old, but better maintained house next door. Always happy to help a Moreau settle in. He used my surname with a familiarity that felt premature. Inside, amidst the dust and echoes, I found the keys left on the mantelpiece, along with a single folded piece of brittle, yellowed paper. Unfolding it, I found 3 lines written in an elegant, spidery script, stark and clear despite the paper's age. "If a door appears where there wasn't one before, don't open it. If you hear footsteps above your room and no one's home, stay still. If something knocks 3 times, knock once in return. No more." I stared at the words, a cold dread trickling down my spine that had nothing to do with the house's ambient chill. Rules. Bizarre, impossible rules. Was this some kind of joke left by my eccentric great-aunt? A prank? But the seriousness of the script, the age of the paper, it felt authentic. Then I noticed it, scrawled hastily at the very bottom. In a different, more modern pen, were 4 more words. "Don't trust the neighbor." My cell phone rang, startling me further. It was Aris, Dr. Aris Thorne, my therapist back in LA, now relegated to concerned friend status via phone calls. "Hey," I answered, trying to sound cheerful. Just got here. The house is... Something good, I hope? Iris asked, their voice calm and professional. A lifeline to the rational world I felt slipping away. Big change for you, Izzy. You settling in okay? Yeah, fine, I lied, glancing at the strange note in my hand. Then out the window towards Elias Vance's house next door. It's big. Needs work, but it's mine. I didn't mention the rules, didn't mention the unsettling neighbor, or the feeling that the dust motes weren't just dancing. They were watching. How could I? Iris would think the stress had finally broken me. Maybe it already had. Okay, Iris said slowly, sensing the hesitation. Just take it easy, all right? Call me anytime, day or night. We hung up. I stood alone in the echoing hallway, the strange note clutched in my hand, the scent of dust and something older filling my lungs. Elias Vance's overly bright eyes flashed in my mind. Don't trust the neighbor, the house sighed, a low groan of old timber settling. Or maybe it wasn't the house at all. Maybe it was just breathing, waiting. Okay. Here are chapters 2, 3, and 4 of the Moreau house. Continuing Isabelle's story as she confronts the house's strange rules, the neighbor's unnerving interest, and the secrets within Constance's journal, maintaining a faster pace and focusing on suspense and survival elements. The first week was a blur of unpacking boxes and nervous exhaustion, punctuated by the house's unsettling symphony. Floorboards groaned overhead when I was downstairs. Pipes sighed in the walls even when no water was running, and cold spots drifted through rooms like unseen icebergs. I told myself it was just an old house settling, exacerbated by stress and lack of sleep. But sometimes, I'd put a book down on the coffee table, turn away for a second, and find it inexplicably moved to the edge when I looked back. Or I'd feel a distinct pressure change in a room, the air growing heavy, followed by the unsettling certainty that I wasn't alone, only to have the feeling vanish as quickly as it came. Then came the door. I was heading upstairs one morning, carrying laundry, sleep-deprived after another night of listening to the house's groans. I reached the landing of the second floor, turned towards my bedroom at the end of the hall, and stopped dead, where yesterday there had been only a blank plaster wall opposite the bathroom. There was now a door, solid oak, dark, heavily grained, with no handle or keyhole, looking as ancient as the house itself. It hadn't been there 12 hours ago, I was certain. My heart hammered against my ribs. Rule 1. If a door appears where there wasn't one before, don't open it. The words from the strange note flashed in my mind. Panic warred with a desperate, morbid curiosity. What was behind it? How was it possible? I forced myself back down the stairs, heart pounding, resolutely avoiding the upper hallway for the rest of the day. The image of that impossible door burned into my memory. By evening, summoning my courage, I crept back upstairs. The wall was blank again. Smooth plaster. No sign a door had ever existed, except when I ran my fingers over the surface, the plaster felt subtly different, newer somehow, and there was a faint, almost invisible rectangular outline if I angled my head just right. The next afternoon, Elias Vance coincidentally waved me over as I checked the mail. Settling in okay, Isabelle? He asked, his smile wide, his eyes sharp. Finding everything all right? Sometimes these old places have interesting architectural quirks, hidden spaces, unexpected layouts. His gaze flickered towards the second floor windows. Anything new pop up? I forced a nonchalant shrug, my skin crawling. Just old house noises. I lied. He chuckled, a sound that didn't quite seem genuine. Ah yes, the house does have its own voice. Best to respect its privacy, I find. He patted my arm reassuringly, a touch that lingered too long, before heading back to his own immaculate yard. Respect its privacy, or don't talk about the impossible doors. That night, desperate for answers, I started truly searching the house, not just unpacking, tucked away beneath a loose floorboard in the back of a dusty linen closet. I found it. A small, leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age, the inside cover read in faded ink, Constance Dubois, her book, 1889. Another relative, or just a previous occupant? I sank onto the floor, heart pounding, and began to read. Constance's elegant script filled the pages with descriptions that mirrored my own unsettling experiences, but amplified by decades of solitary fear. October 12th. The house breathes tonight. Cold drafts from walls that should be solid. Cold drafts from walls that should be solid. Feel watched constantly. And then, chillingly, November 3rd. A door. Again. In the upstairs hall where the nursery once was. Dark wood. No handle. It whispers promises, wants me to open it. See what lies beyond the threshold it creates. Remember father's rule. New doors lead nowhere good. Must resist. Further intrigues detailed shifting walls, objects moving, and a growing dread of something else sharing the space. Something she eventually began calling the architect, which seemed to delight in altering the very fabric of the house around her. Finding the journal wasn't comforting. It was terrifying confirmation. This wasn't just in my head. This house had rules because it was dangerously, impossibly alive. And Constance's final entry, scrawled frantically. He watches from next door, knows the house too well, brings gifts. Don't trust him. The ink trailed off, the page torn. Constance's journal became my secret obsession, my only confidante in the increasingly oppressive atmosphere of the Moreau house. Her elegant, fearful script detailed a life lived under the thumb of the architect's whims. Rooms changing size overnight, furniture rearranging itself into unsettling tableaus, whispers that promised secrets if only she would listen more closely. The journal hinted the original owner, a reclusive architect obsessed with esoteric geometry and living structures, had somehow imprinted his will, or something worse, onto the house itself. The minor anomalies escalated. Objects didn't just move slightly. They'd vanish for hours before reappearing in obvious, almost mocking locations. Whispers sometimes coalesced into almost words, just at the edge of hearing. The cold spots became larger, more persistent. Sleep offered little escape, filled with dreams of shifting corridors and doors that opened onto brick walls. I found myself calling Eris Thorne more often, the video calls a fragile link to sanity. I tried to explain the growing unease, the feeling of the house actively resisting me. Izzy, Eris said gently, their face etched with concern on my laptop screen. You've been under immense stress, grief, job loss, moving. It's classic manifestation of anxiety. Old houses make noises. Isolation plays tricks on the mind. Have you considered finding a local therapist? Or maybe this house, with its history, isn't the best place for you right now. Their rational explanations felt like ashes in my mouth, highlighting my utter isolation with the impossible reality I was living. Then came the footsteps. I was in bed, reading Constance's journal, by the weak light of my bedside lamp. The rest of the house, in the deep silence of 3 a.m. Suddenly, from the ceiling directly above my room, the supposedly empty, inaccessible attic space, came the distinct sound of heavy footsteps. Thump, pause, thump, pause, deliberate, measured pacing, back and forth, back and forth. My blood froze. I was utterly, completely alone in the house. Rule 2. If you hear footsteps above your room and no one's home, stay still. I didn't dare breathe. I lay rigid, clutching the journal, listening to the impossible weight moving above me. The pacing continued for what felt like an hour, each heavy tread vibrating faintly through the ceiling plaster. Then, as abruptly as it started, it stopped. Silence rushed back in, thick and suffocating. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next day, exhaustion making me reckless, I cornered Elias Vance while he was trimming his perfect hedges. Elias, I asked, trying to sound casual. This old house? Does it have, like, really bad pests? Rats in the attic, maybe? Heard some noises last night. He paused his trimming, giving me a thoughtful look. Pests. Could be. Old timbers, you know. House is grown. Best just to ignore it, Isabelle. Don't go poking around in attics or crawl spaces. Let the house settle its bones. He then produced a small object from his pocket. It was a charm, intricately constructed from small pieces of dark wood and twisted wire, forming a complex geometric shape. Little housewarming gift, he said, pressing it into my hand. Found it at an antique fair. Supposed to harmonize energies in old structures. Hang it near your window. Might quiet things down. The charm felt unnaturally cold, heavy, and seemed to vibrate with a barely perceptible hum. His advice, his gift. It felt less like help and more like feeding the machine. That night, driven by suspicion, I cross-referenced the symbol on the charm with sketches Constance had made in her journal. They weren't identical, but the geometric principles, the specific angles, they were disturbingly similar. Constance had labeled her sketches architect sigils, found near points of alteration, used for focus, or binding. Binding what? Or binding who? My suspicion of Elias Vance solidified into cold certainty. He wasn't just a nosy neighbor. He was involved, somehow intertwined with the house's malevolence. Was he controlling it? Appeasing it? Constance's journal mentioned the previous occupant becoming obsessed with documenting the house's changes, seeing them not as a threat, but as revelations. Was Elias following the same dangerous path? I started watching his house from my windows, noticing lights on at odd hours, sometimes catching glimpses of him seemingly talking to himself in his yard. Facing my house, I pored over Constance's journal, searching for defenses, explanations. She wrote about the rules, confirming they were passed down, essential for survival. She detailed the entity's patterns, the doors appearing during emotional lows, the footsteps pacing when it felt ignored, and the knocks. The knocks were described as the most direct interaction, a test, an invitation. A test, an invitation. 3 knocks, she wrote. Always 3, like a mocking trinity. It asks. A single knock back acknowledges its presence without granting entry. More than that, Father said, more than that. Invites it in. The invitation came on a still, moonless night. I was in the living room trying to lose myself in a book, the house unnervingly quiet around me. Then it came. Knock, 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 sharp, hard. Authoritative raps that didn't come from the front door or back, but seemed to emanate from the solid plaster wall beside the fireplace. My heart leaped into my throat. Rule 3. If something knocks 3 times, knock once in return. No more. The air grew heavy, expectant. I could almost feel something leaning against the other side of that wall, listening, waiting. My hand trembled, resisting the urge to ignore it completely, or worse, to yell out. I reached over and gently tapped my knuckle, once against the wooden armrest of my chair. Tap. The silence that followed was absolute, profound. The feeling of the presence lingered for a long moment, a cold weight against the wall, then slowly, gradually receded. I sat frozen, listening to my own ragged breathing. Less than 5 minutes later, my doorbell rang. My stomach plummeted. Through the peephole, I saw Elias Vance standing on my porch, holding a plate covered in foil. His usual wide smile was firmly in place. I opened the door a crack, keeping the chain latched. Elias? Everything okay? Just wonderful, Isabelle. He beamed. Made far too much apple crumble, thought I'd share. He held up the plate. Say, he added, his tone shifting slightly, becoming more probing. Did you happen to hear any strange noises just now? Sounded almost like knocking. Knocking came from this direction. Wondered if maybe a branch hit your siding? His timing was too perfect. His question too specific. The disappointment that flickered in his eyes when I shook my head and politely declined the crumble, claiming I was about to turn in, was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. He knew about the knocks. He might have even been expecting a different outcome. My phone buzzed. A text from Eris. Izzy, seriously worried. Looked up property records. Multiple unexplained deaths, disappearances linked to that address over past century. Please, tell me you're making plans to leave. I started to type a reply, explaining about Elias, the rules. But the signal bars on my phone suddenly dropped to 0. No service. No service. Inside the house, communication with the outside world was becoming unreliable. Later that night, unable to sleep, I looked out my bedroom window towards Elias' house. His lights were off, but I saw movement in his darkened backyard. Using the zoom on my phone's camera, miraculously getting a signal near the window, I saw him. He wasn't just standing there. He was carefully drawing symbols on the ground with white chalk. Symbols identical to the ones Constance had sketched, facing directly towards my house. He wasn't just watching. He was actively participating, actively inviting, and I had a sickening feeling. I knew who the invitation was for. The symbols Elias Vance had drawn around my house weren't just creepy folk art. They were locks. I discovered this the hard way when, fueled by adrenaline and the stark warnings in Constance's journal, I decided enough was enough. I packed a go bag, ready to flee to a motel, anywhere but here. But the front door wouldn't budge. The back door was fused shut. Every window, even the small bathroom one on the second floor, felt sealed by an unseen force, rattling uselessly in their frames. My phone signal remained stubbornly dead. I was trapped. Then I heard his key turning in my front door lock. A lock I hadn't given him a key for. Elias Vance stepped inside, his overly friendly smile firmly back in place, but his eyes burned with a feverish, zealous light I hadn't seen before. He held a thick, leather-bound book, similar in age to Constance's journal. "Leaving so soon, Isabelle?" he asked, his voice dripping with false concern. "But the house has only just begun to truly welcome you. Get out of my house, Elias." I choked out, backing away towards the living room, grabbing a heavy fireplace poker. A pathetic defense, I knew, but better than nothing. "Oh, but it's not truly your house, is it?" he countered, advancing slowly, calmly. "It belongs to the architect. Always has." Agnes knew. Constance knew. They respected the process, mostly. But you have the Moreau lineage, don't you? A sensitivity. You're the missing piece. The final tenet needed to stabilize its design, to fully awaken its consciousness. He tapped the leather-bound book. "It's all in the original owner's projections. The house is a living blueprint, constantly refining itself, reaching for perfection. And it needs a conscious mind, anchored within, to complete the pattern." He was insane. Cult of one, worshipping the malevolent sentience of the house. "You're crazy. This place isn't alive. It's haunted, dangerous." Elias laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "Danger is merely a side effect of creation. The architect reshapes reality. It offers knowledge, order beyond human comprehension. All it asks is integration." His eyes gleamed. "You followed the minor rules, Isabelle. Instinctively, perhaps. You felt the boundaries. But tonight," his smile widened, becoming predatory. "Tonight, we embrace the design." He made a sharp, guttural sound, and the house responded. The wall beside the fireplace, where the knocking had originated, seemed to shimmer, then dissolve entirely, revealing a dark, narrow doorway that hadn't been there seconds before. Rule 1 manifest. A cold draft smelling of damp earth, and something infinitely old poured out. "The architect invites you," Elias urged, gesturing towards the impossible opening. See where it leads. I recoiled, poker held high. No! My defiance seemed to anger something far greater than Elias. A deafening, overlapping series of 3 sharp, demanding raps exploded from every wall simultaneously, shaking the foundations, rattling my teeth. Rule 3 barrage. Pictures flew from the walls, plaster rained down. Elias flinched but seemed energized by the chaos. It insists. Then came the footsteps. Rule 2. Not just from above, but from everywhere. Heavy, deliberate steps echoing from the ceiling. The floor below. The hallway outside the living room. Seemingly circling, closing in. The sound was deafening, disorienting. Stay still, I screamed instinctively, remembering the rule, pressing myself back against a bookcase, trying to make myself small, insignificant. Foolish girl, Elias sneered. Why stay still when you can participate? He strode towards the newly appeared doorway, beckoning me. The architect offers passage. The house itself seemed to twist. The living room walls groaned, visibly shifting. The hallway outside lengthened impossibly. The front door receding into the distance like a scene viewed through the wrong end of a telescope. Another door slammed into existence beside the first new one. This one made of rough, splintery wood. Then another across the room, ornately carved. Doors appearing and disappearing. Reality fraying at the seams. Panic threatened to overwhelm me. Elias rules. The house itself attacking. My eyes darted to Constance's journal, lying open on a nearby table where I'd been reading it earlier. Her frantic script. Something about safe spots. The pantry. A passage flashed in my mind. Built over the old wellspring. Its energy resists the changes. The pantry was off the kitchen, down the impossibly long hallway. Elias stood between me and that direction, near one of the new, dark doorways, his face alight with fanatical glee as the house shuddered around us. The knocking intensified, shaking the floor. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I had to move. I remembered Rule 3, knock once back. Could it buy me time? While Elias watched, expecting me to crumble, I reached out and knocked sharply, once on the sturdy oak bookcase beside me. For a blessed second, the deafening 3-knock barrage paused, replaced by that heavy, expectant silence. The footsteps faltered. In that instant of reprieve, I acted. I shoved the heavy bookcase forward with all my might. It toppled with a crash, not hitting Elias directly, but blocking his path towards me, books and dust exploding outwards. The pantry, I screamed, bolting from the living room into the now impossibly long, wavering hallway. Praying Constance was right. Behind me, I heard Elias roar in fury, followed by the resumption of the deafening knocks and the heavy, pursuing footsteps. The hallway seemed to stretch forever, the walls rippling like heat haze. Doors flickered into existence on either side, tempting shortcuts, deadly traps. I ignored them, focusing only on the far end, the swinging door that led to the kitchen, Constance's words echoing. Only the pantry remains true. Just as I reached the kitchen door, the floorboards directly behind me splintered upwards, grasped by shadowy tendrils of something rising from below. The minister's presence, the architect's core enraged. I threw myself through the swinging door, landing hard on the cool kitchen tile just as the hallway behind me seemed to collapse inwards with a sound like tearing reality. Scrambling up, I lunged for the narrow pantry door tucked away beside the old stove. It opened easily. I threw myself inside, into the small, dark space that smelled reassuringly of dry goods and old wood, and slammed the door shut, fumbling for a lock that wasn't there. Outside the thin pantry door, the chaos of the house continued. The pounding, the footsteps, Elias Vance shouting my name now, demanding I embrace the architect's design. I pressed myself against the pantry's solid, unchanging shelves, clutching Constance's journal, trapped in the only real space left, listening to the house, trying to tear itself apart to reach me. Locked inside the narrow pantry, the chaos outside was a terrifying symphony, muffled by the thick wooden door. I could hear the house groaning like a beast in pain, the sharp cracks of plaster giving way, the violent rattle of furniture skidding across floors, the deafening, overlapping knock, knock, knock that seemed to shake the very foundations. And through it all, Elias Vance's voice, sometimes shouting commands or incantations, sometimes screaming in fury or something else, fear, pain. It was impossible to tell. I huddled on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, clutching Constance's journal, the flashlight beam trembling in my hand. I flipped through the brittle pages, searching frantically for anything. Any clue Constance might have left about surviving such an onslaught. Her later entries were frantic, bordering on incoherent, filled with sketches of impossible geometries and warnings about the architect's hunger for completion. One line stood out, underlined several times. It builds upon strong emotion. Fear feeds it, but focus will. That disrupts the pattern. The pantry. Old wellspring. Grounded. That's what it felt like in here. While the house raged outside, the pantry remained still. The air calm. The shelves of dusty jars and canned goods reassuringly solid. I focused on my breathing. Tried to emulate the calm, focused will Constance described, pushing back against the terror, threatening to consume me. Slowly, agonizingly, over what felt like hours, the cacophony outside began to subside. The violent shaking lessened. The deafening knocks faded to intermittent thuds. The footsteps grew distant, sporadic. Elias's voice was gone, replaced by an unnerving heavy silence, broken only by the settling groans of the house structure. When the silence stretched unbroken for nearly half an hour, I risked moving. My muscles screamed in protest. Pushing myself up, I pressed my ear against the pantry door. Nothing. Just the faint hum the house always seemed to possess. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I pushed the door open a crack and peered out. The kitchen was a wreck. Chairs overturned, cupboards hanging open, flour dusting the floor like snow. But it was stable. The hallway beyond, however, was subtly wrong. The hallway beyond, however, was subtly wrong. The perspective seemed slightly skewed, the ceiling feeling lower, the far end, where the living room would seem further away than it should be. The impossible doorways Elias had summoned were gone, but the walls looked scarred, bruised. There was no sign of Elias, but lying near the entrance to the living room, where the bookcase had fallen, was the heavy, leather-bound book he had carried. Its cover was scorched, the pages riffled as if by an intense wind. I didn't dare touch it. My phone line, discarded on the kitchen counter, suddenly lit up. One bar of signal. It flickered, then held. With trembling fingers, I dialed Eris Thorne. Izzy? Oh my God, Izzy. Are you okay? I lost the call, heard. Shouting. Crashing. Eris's voice was frantic, laced with genuine fear now. The professional skepticism gone. Eris, my voice was a croak. The house. Elias. He was trying to... I couldn't form the words. Get out, Izzy. Eris pleaded. Just get out of there. Now. I'm calling 911. Telling them there's a disturbance. An unstable individual. Just get outside. I tried the back door. Still sealed tight. I tried the back door. The front door, impossibly distant down the warped hallway, also refused to budge. The windows remained stubbornly locked by unseen forces. I can't, I whispered into the phone. Eris, I think I'm trapped. The line went dead, the single bar vanishing from the screen. The house fell silent again, watching, waiting. The architect had repelled the immediate threat, perhaps even consumed its errant worshipper. But its design, I realized with a sinking heart, still included me. Constance's journal, lying open on the pantry floor, felt less like a guide to escape and more like a manual for occupancy. Time lost meaning in the Moreau house. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. The police came, responding to Iris's frantic call. They found a shaken young woman in a strangely damaged but structurally sound house, reporting a dispute with a neighbor who had subsequently vanished. They searched for Elias Vance. They found his pristine, empty house next door. No sign of foul play. They found the strange symbols drawn in his yard, dismissed them as eccentricities. They found his scorched book in my living room, logged it as evidence in his missing person case. They found no sign of forced entry, no confirmation of my wilder claims, which I quickly learned to downplay. Eventually, Elias Vance became just another San Jose missing person statistic. The case went cold. Iris Thorne pleaded with me to leave, offered to fly out, help me find somewhere else. But I couldn't. Partly, it was inertia, the exhaustion of trauma. Partly, it was the chilling lack of funds or anywhere else to go. But mostly, it was a dawning, terrifying understanding. The house wasn't just walls and wood anymore. It was a system, an entity, and I was now inextricably part of its pattern. Leaving felt impossible, like trying to walk away from my own shadow. Constance's journal became my guide, my Bible. I learned the architect's rhythms. I learned that the impossible doors, Rule 1, were proofs, attempts by the house to expand or test its boundaries. Ignoring them starved that specific impulse. I learned the footsteps above, Rule 2, were echoes of its consciousness, pacing, contemplating. Staying still avoided drawing its direct, potentially consuming attention. I learned the 3 knocks, Rule 3, were indeed a call, an attempt at interface. The single knock back was a necessary acknowledgement, a resetting of the connection without opening a true conduit. Life became a ritual of adherence. I charted the appearance and disappearance of doors in a new ledger, continuing Constance's work. I timed the pacing overhead, learning to differentiate its moods. I answered the knocks with the precise single rap required. The house, in return, seemed to settle. The violent shifts lessened, the overt hostility faded, replaced by a constant, humming awareness, the feeling of living inside the mind of something vast, ancient, and unknowable. I was no longer just a resident. I was a component, a necessary piece maintaining the intricate, impossible equilibrium of the architect's design. Years passed. I rarely left the house anymore. Groceries were delivered. Iris still called sometimes, our conversations becoming strained, filled with unspoken truths. He knew I hadn't truly escaped, knew I was living something beyond his therapeutic understanding. One quiet afternoon, decades later it felt, though the calendar said otherwise, I sat in the living room, reading. Outside, new neighbors had moved into the house next door. Elias Vance's old place, long since sold. I heard the laughter of a child playing in their yard. Then, a hesitant tap, tap, tap sounded on my front door. Not the commanding knock of the architect, but the light, uncertain rap of a small hand. I stood moving slowly, my joints stiff. I went to the door, peered through the peephole. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, stood on the porch, looking curious. She rapped 3 times again, more insistently this time. I didn't open the door. I simply stood behind it, listening to her impatient rapping. Then placing my own aged hand against the cool wood of the door, I responded with a single, soft knock. Outside, I heard the little girl huff in disappointment, then the sound of her footsteps running back across the lawn. I turned away from the door, back towards the quiet waiting rooms of the house. The architect was calm today. The patterns held. The patterns held. I smoothed my apron, checked the clock on the mantelpiece. Time to prepare dinner. Time to maintain the balance. Another day survived. Another night approaching in my permanent residence. Forever the keeper of the Moreau house and its silent, watchful designer. The house sighed around me. A breath of dust and ages. It was home. Isabelle survived the architect's fury, only to become its permanent resident, forever bound to the house's rules. If this chilling blueprint gave you the creeps, knock once for like, share, and subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules. Some doors are better left unopened.